Ready.
And we're up. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Lucy,
No
for
problem.
helping us with our technical assistance. We have our dear friend Lucy Oliver, one of our finest sisters in the Lord, has come back after a long time. She's been doing studies, and she got a tan since she went away, and all of that. So tonight we're going to continue on in the Book of Revelation. Hello to Ingrid and Phil, who are in Spain. We're in Spain, are we?
Question.
In the plane.
There you go. There you go. All right. So Ben, who was our budding author, will not clearly be doing stand-up in this future, but he's doing well as an author. So we want to remember that. In fact, I'm gonna use or employ Ben's dramatic reading skills that I learned he has when he did his book opening when we were at the Coral Gables Museum. He did a dramatic reading of his book, but a impassioned reading of his book, which one was it, Ben?
To Belay and Back.
To Belay and Back, which is his second book, by the way. So since you've been away, Ben's written 2 books. Yeah. So that's our Harvard Scholar guy. So and Reno was on his way to the museum, and he decided to take up his cross and follow us back to the apartment so that we could have fellowship, and we appreciate that. And so the Lord will bless you by, making one of those museum pieces affordable for you tomorrow when you go, and maybe you'll buy something. So we're gonna pop into Revelation chapter 14, and in the text I didn't put it, but Revelation 15 is the shortest chapter in the book of Revelation, so we're gonna add that as well. It kind of relates to 14. And so we'll go ahead and open this up in prayer, Ben, and then we will start going through Revelation 14, which will relate to a certain extent to some of the stuff we covered last week of Revelation 13. And so without further ado, Ben, go ahead and open this up there.
Lord, thank you for this beautiful opportunity to study your word. Please bring insight and wisdom, awareness, compassion, all of your most beautiful characteristics. Bring them through Herb and help bring us light and understanding to this, one of your most difficult and rewarding books. We're so blessed to have Lucy and Reno here in person with us today as well, Lord, reminding us that your word will become increasingly important to give sustenance to believers the world around every day as we go forward, Lord. And so we're just so blessed to have this home church, this community represented by the people here, the people watching, and even the people who get to watch this video later at some point, once they're inspired and realize how much important information and insights and blessings are brought by this kind of study. So, Lord, we're so grateful. Thank you for bringing us all together, both here in person and on the internet. Your will be done in the name of Jesus Christ.
All right. So last week we did Revelation 13, and the key figures there were who, Steve?
Revelation 13. Who were?
All right. Clearly made a great impact on you guys last week.
Oh, wait, no. Antichrist and the false prophet.
Right. Those are like 2 really big, key, important guys. And, this week we're going into 14. And in 14, we're going to talk a little bit more about the mark of the beast. But before we do that, we're going to open it up, if I can find my laser pointer. There it is. I had it. I can't do a teaching without my laser pointer. Wouldn't be cool. So we are going to start out with, we usually have, Lucy, if you want to, I've got a printout for you, if you want to be King James.
Yeah.
It'll make it easier for you.
No worries.
Unless you like it on your phone.
Either way is fine for me.
Okay. So either way, so we're going to go ahead and Revelation chapter 14, verse 1, Luce. And I always lead off with the first person, and I go clockwise, so you're the first person up, so you're up. just read verse 1 for us, and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written in their foreheads.
Okay, so Revelation, 14:1 starts out, after we finished up in Revelation 13. And in Revelation 13, just to sort of backtrack, we talked about the false prophet, and we talked about the Antichrist, and we learned in Revelation 13 that both of these individuals, who we have kind of depicted here on our Daniel 70th week, we've got the false prophet depicted as a guy wearing a robe looking very similar to the Roman Catholic Pope, which very well may be an accurate depiction because he fits a lot of the descriptions. And then the Antichrist is described as this multi-headed beast, different than any other beast that ever lived before. Now, these two individuals instituted what? What was the big plan that the false prophet demanded that the people, under the rule of the Antichrist, participate in?
It's a new one world order.
Yep. But how would you identify yourself as a member of that one world order?
With a mark.
Yourself.
Okay. What kind of mark? Like a tattoo of Mickey Mouse on your shoulder?
Most likely
Anchor?
I think it was a 666.
Most likely biogenetic.
Zeus?
The 666, right?
Okay, so Lucy's saying, there's this thing, 666. As a matter of fact, it's Revelation 13, verse 18 that says what? It says, "Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666, which is, the mark of the beast." Now, the question is, what is this mark of the beast? Because false prophet said, unless you take the mark of the beast, which is sort of symbolized in verse 18 of Revelation 13 as 666, but almost certainly isn't a tattoo of the number 666. This mark, what happens if you don't take it?
It's going to mean your life.
Yeah.
It costs you your life not to take it.
And
no commerce. You can't
There you
buy
go.
or sell.
that's the first real motivator. Is like you can't buy or sell unless you get it. And so people are going to need to have it to be able to work and to operate and to shop and do all these things. But, Ben, you alluded to the idea that it might also be, in addition to, what do we have, those RFID, RFID chips that,
Yeah, the microchips.
the microchips, you can track the person.
We've been talking about it for a while now.
Yeah.
Right?
And dogs have had chips to identify them for
Cats,
a
yeah.
long, long time. It's real easy, just under the skin.
It's under the skin and very quick.
And they
and
can
it tracks you.
They can track
Yeah.
you.
Mhm.
They can also put data in there. It can hold data like your banking records,
Sure.
Yeah.
your criminal records,
Your credit card.
credit
Credit
card,
card.
medical records, health.
Yeah.
So, but I believe that this mark of the beast is related to what is referred to in Revelation 13:14 as the image of the beast. It says that the false prophet was able to deceive the people into following the Antichrist by doing what? What kind of signs and wonders did he do?
Brought down fire from heaven.
He was able to bring fire down from heaven, and he was able to do that, and he told the people, to make an image of the beast. And so the issue that we talked about last week was, what is this image of the beast? Because it says he was able to make an image of the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. Antichrist gets killed, and then what happens?
Comes back to life. It
Right.
appears.
And it looks like the Antichrist goes down into, the place that we've studied about when we talked about hell. What was the holding place for the fallen angels?
Bottom's pit.
Bottomless pit, also known as Tartarus. Now here in my depiction, we've got two different artistic depictions. I believe that these are both part and parcel of the same prison system for fallen angels and for Satan. When Antichrist is killed, he goes down into the bottomless pit, and it says that while he's there, he has this spiritual epiphany. What happens to Antichrist when he is in the bottomless pit in Revelation 13?
Raised from the dead. Comes back as...
Well, before he's raised from the dead, while he's in the pit, what happens?
Oh, that the dragon itself, the great dragon, becomes basically possessed of Satan.
So the dragon is none other than who?
Satan.
Satan.
Okay, so Satan indwells in some way the spirit of the Antichrist, which is, maybe his physical body is there as well. It's unclear. He is almost certainly not just a man who makes a decision to follow after Satan, but he is a Superman, a Nephilim, a metahuman, a person who has evolved beyond normal Adamic man genetically. And he's indwelt by the spirit of Satan himself so that he's able, Satan, to raise up the dead body of the Antichrist, reanimate it, and it comes out of the bottomless pit. And we had an allusion to that back when we studied Revelation chapter 9. Remember, what was the crazy thing that happened?
To open the bottomless pit where all the crazy beasts are going to come out.
Right. These dragon, locust, demon things come out, and it said they had a what over them?
A leader, a master.
King. He had a king over him. And, insect locusts don't have kings or lieutenants or corporals or generals or any of those things. So we clearly know that we're talking about these disembodied spirit beings who now have physical bodies, but they're freakish, transgenic, strange bodies. And the name of the king who was over them was, in Greek and Hebrew, what?
Apollyon.
In Greek, Apollyon, which means what?
Destroyer.
The destroyer. How about that? Which is the same nickname for the mascot of CERN, which is the large hadron Shiva. The Hindu god of destruction is Shiva. And it's interesting enough that point out that the king over the demons of the bottomless pit was also known as the destroyer. In Greek, that's Apollo or Apollyon. In Hebrew, it would be Abaddon or Abaddon. And so Apollo was also a Greek god who was supposedly the son of Zeus and an earth woman. So he was a half man, half god who was the son of the sky god. And it's this same title that's applied to the Antichrist, who goes down to the bottomless pit and is resurrected. And we find out in Revelation 13 that there is this image of the beast that in verse 15 of Revelation 13 is granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So there's this thing that the Bible calls the mark of the beast, which is related to the image of the beast, and the image of the beast is like a replica of the Antichrist himself, because he puts the image of the beast in the temple, in the Holy of Holies, and it can talk and speak and interact with people. So the idea that was posited back in the 70s that maybe it was a hologram, like something you would see at Disneyland or Disney World, probably not the case. This seems to be more along the lines of, as Ben pointed out, biogenetic engineering, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in a couple verses. And, cloning is a scientific practice that we have. And, doctors have been using that, and geneticists have been using that for a number of decades now. Dolly the sheep was cloned from a cell, and you can make a replica. So you could actually make a replica of a person if it was legal to do so. Technologically, we can do it. So the question is, and I believe, that this image of the beast is some kind of a genetic replica of the Antichrist, and it speaks to Satan's last days attempt to, as the book that we talked about that was written, that I kind of made reference to, called The Corruption of the Image. Satan's idea is to corrupt the image of man, which is, God, in the form of a moving, talking entity called Adam that was placed in the garden. It was created in the image of who? Adam was created in whose image? My image? Or?
No, in the Lord it's the Father.
Yeah, in God's image. And so I believe Satan, it seems to be suggesting in Revelation 13, has somehow found a way to master the technique to manipulate the genetic material that makes us, uniquely human beings, genetically Adamic human beings, because of our nucleotides and the way they are structured makes us a human being as opposed to making us a chimpanzee, as opposed to making us something else. So we throw that out there because we talked about that, and it says at the end of Revelation 13 that he causes all, both great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or in their right hand or in their forehead. and no man can buy or sell who doesn't have the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. And here's wisdom: let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, it is number 666. And so that ends Revelation 13. Now we get to Lucy talking to us about the 144,000. So we shift dramatically from the mark of the beast being instituted on the planet Earth during the latter half or second half of the tribulation period. No, it's the Great Tribulation period. Now the video camera switches to heaven. And in heaven, we see what? We see, now the question, I guess, which is controversial for verse 1, is this heaven or is this earth?
Yeah.
Now you look at your notes and commentaries, you're going to have a split of opinions on this. Mark Hitchcock, whose work we have referenced before, he makes a suggestion that it's earthly Mount Zion, which is actually in Israel, and on Mount Zion, it's basically a hill. You know, you got the Temple Mountain built on it and all that. Not all that terribly impressive, to be honest with you. But the problem with that is that Jesus can't be on Mount Zion prior to the second coming. Right. So they would have to argue that, well, that's they fast forwarded the video to after the second coming, after Armageddon, and he's standing there with 144,000. But I think the more intelligent and more reasonable interpretation is the one I think most people take. Though I would say Mark Hitchcock and possibly J. Vernon McGee would take the Mount Zion on planet Earth. But looking at most of the Bible prophecy expositors and using common sense, it almost certainly is making reference to the heavenly Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a type of the heavenly city called the New Jerusalem. And in the Jerusalem in heaven, there's a temple just like there was a temple on the planet Earth. And so what we see here on Earth, we see also in heaven. So there's a replication of the important things of heaven here on Earth. So what we have here in verse 1, I believe, is 144,000 individuals standing before the Lord on Mount Zion in heaven. Ben, while you're flipping through your pages, we'll talk about why I think that. It says that, I looked and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion with 144,000 having his father's name written in their foreheads. Now, let's go to Psalm chapter 116, verse 15. I like these small, intimate gatherings. And got the excellent readers here. So,
Psalm 116,
verse 15. I like this verse.
Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints.
Yeah, that sets the tone, I think, for Revelation 14. Because I believe that these 144,000 are, in fact, not Jehovah's Witnesses, as Jehovah's Witnesses suggest, and they're not Seventh-day Adventists, as the Seventh-day Adventists suggest, and they're not on the planet Earth either, because Jesus hasn't come back to the planet Earth yet, and he won't until Revelation chapter 19, which we haven't gotten to yet. 144,000 are the same individuals that we first met when?
In chapter 6 or 7?
Steve, you're good, man. You're a student of the Bible. Go to Revelation 7 for us, Steve, in your gold-gilded Thomas Nelson King James Version study Bible.
Well, it's a question about the New Jerusalem in heaven, or the temple in heaven, and the earthbound.
Yeah.
Which chapter? That's why I was looking back. Is it in Numbers or earlier, when the instructions exactly on how to build the temple in Jerusalem were made? And those instructions they were a duplicate of the temple in heaven. So that's the reason why there are very specific directions on how to build the temple.
So you're saying when King Solomon and King David got the original instruction plans or construction plans for the temple, they were given...
It was a copy of...
So David didn't sort of sit up and then say, I think it looks cool.
Good idea.
We have a Florida room here, and we put a terrace there. Right? No, he was instructed based upon, you're saying, a pre-existing physical structure in the Father's house in heaven. Okay, so that's a good point, Ben, and it is in Numbers, I believe it is, and thank you for pointing that out. It just shows you that some people study the Bible. Ben, you've done so well in the last few years. And just when I first met Ben, he was a smart guy because he went to Harvard, but he didn't know the Bible nearly as well as he does now. So you really have,
Holy Spirit does miracles.
man, you've covered some ground, man. And with these 2 new study Bibles that you have, you're going to be a dangerous individual. Dangerous
Amen.
individual. So
Dangerously
Steve,
good.
right? Steve's going to tell us who these 144,000 are. We met them a few chapters ago, back in Revelation chapter 7. So read for us, if you would, Steve, 2 sections. First, read verses 4 through 9 for me.
Okay. Revelation chapter 7, verse 4 through 9. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000, all of the tribes of the children of Israel. Of the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Reuben were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Asher were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Naphtali were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Manasseh were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Simeon were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Levi were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Issachar were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Zebulun were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Joseph were sealed 12,000. And of the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000.
All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about what the Jehovah's Witnesses say about these 144,000, and we're going to point out why it's not true. But while I have you there, Steve, in Revelation 7, why don't you go ahead and read for us Revelation 7, verses 13 through 17.
Okay. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence came they? And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes, and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in the temple. And he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them into living fountains of water, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes.
Okay, so we find out in Revelation 7, verse 13, that these same guys that get introduced at the beginning of Revelation 7, by the end, you're kind of getting a fast forward view of these guys later, and Revelation 7 gives you a before and after shot. This is what I look like when I started high school, and this is what I look like when I graduated. Well, they graduated after they did their job. Their job was to be what? These are all Jews, 12,000 Jews, one from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. So if you multiply the 12,000 times 12, you get 144,000 Jewish guys who happen to be, of each one of the tribes, and these individuals are actually the replacement for
The church.
the church. There's this whole idea of replacement theology says that because the Jews rejected Jesus, God used the church to replace Israel in the plans for God's future kingdom. That's not totally inaccurate, because replacement theology is in fact correct. It's just in the reverse. God uses the 144,000 Jews out of the 12 tribes of Israel to replace the church, which is no longer on earth to preach the gospel, because they are where?
At the Father's house.
And how'd they get there? Space shuttle?
No, they were
Helicopter rides there?
the draft.
At the draft?
Pretty much. I don't know how to say it in other words.
What would be
Right.
But you
the
understand.
common parlance for the
Rapture.
departure, the rapture,
Of course.
which we find from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 in Latin Bibles.
Gathering together or gathering away.
Well, harpazo is the word used, and it can mean, snatching away. It's violent snatching. In Latin, it would be rapturo. In English, it's caught up. The rapture occurs, and it may happen at any second. Hopefully, it won't be long. But when that happens, the primary role of the church isn't to pay tithes, guys. or to go to pop culture gathering place called a church that has a cross out front or a cool sign out front. Crosses aren't really cool anymore, so they've gotten rid of those. But they'll probably have a Starbucks in there. And you go there and you drink Starbucks and you listen to contemporary rock music. That's not what the role of the church is. To work, live your life, go to school, date your girlfriend or boyfriend, raise your kids. And then on Sunday, you go to the social club, have Starbucks, listen to rock music, and somebody will say a few words to you about Jesus or the Bible, say amen, God bless you, and then you continue with we're going to have a picnic, and we're doing this, and so-and-so's getting married, it's going to be a baby shower at so-and-so's house, and you do all the announcements. Don't forget talking about tithing. You got prostate problems, do your tithes, and God will take that off of you. Those are tithes and offerings. And that's not the church. The role of the church is to do what?
Spread the gospel.
That's it, man. That is the role of the church. The church are the evangelists for the good news. The good news is that
Christ died for you.
And because he did that, we don't have to go to this horrible place depicted in our timeline here called the Lake of Fire, which is temporary like the Catholic Church teaches.
No, sir. It is forever and ever.
Wow. Forever. Forever is a long time to regret something, and forever is a long time to be in discomfort. But forever is certainly a long time to be in torment. And that's, Steve has correctly pointed out, we're going to get to that hopefully a little bit later tonight, about the finality and eternality of the place of punishment, the ultimate last final stop place of punishment known as hell or the lake of fire. So, what we find out is the church's job is to preach the gospel. Jesus died on the cross for you so that if you turn your life over to him by becoming a believer or a follower of him and let him be the Lord of your life and tell you how to run the rest of your life, you get out of the penalty, which would be separation from God at the lake of fire forever. And that's good news, because that is a gift that's so valuable, or a prize, or a benefit so great that you could never earn that. Right. Even though, Lucy, you ran right over from work and you put in a full work day, how many work days would you have to put in to earn enough money to buy your way into heaven? You have to work forever and ever and ever. And so God is going to allow people who insist on working their way into heaven to have a spot at the lake of fire where they can work out their sins. It's just that because we're finite humans and we've committed an offense against an infinite God, then using our Harvard-trained writer Ben's intellectual reasoning capacity, we know that if a finite individual is paying back a debt owed to an infinite entity, the debt then owed is an infinite debt. So if you're going to be working at Nikki Beach, or in this case working at the Lake of Fire, you're going to have to work for how long to pay the debt off?
Eternity.
It's going to be infinity. You're going to have to put in infinite number of work hours, meaning it'll never end, which means you'll never get out, which means you're doomed. But there's good news. The debt has already been paid for you. What? Are you serious? Who did this thing? What madness be this? Well, let me tell you, that's the role of the church. Let me tell you why you don't have to spend eternity in hell, my friend. Why? Because God came to earth in the form of a man to pay for the sins of the first man, who is none other than Adam. And that's the good news. That's the gospel. But we find out that after the rapture occurs, there's no more church to preach the gospel. So God replaces the church and their evangelism role with a group of 144,000 individuals, 12,000 Jewish guys from each one of the 12 tribes of Israel, who are hallmarked by the fact that they adhere to sexual purity. And it appears that during the tribulation period, we kind of already see that happening now, that sexual immorality will be rampant. And we see already, we turn on television, we see sex is everywhere. And, I like to think that when I try to explain my worldview, is that, it's God versus Satan, and Satan has attacked and declared, the long war against God 6,000 years ago in the garden. His primary target in this war can't be God because God is infinite and all powerful, so he can't do anything to him. So he targets instead the man, the son of Adam. But he used as his primary weapon what? Deception, hydrogen bombs, but more to the point than deception. What is the primary weapon? I would suggest that
Sexual
the primary weapon has always been, from the garden, the woman. In the garden, Satan did not make a full frontal attack on Adam in the garden. Hey, if you eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you can be even more the man than you are. God is cheating you out of godhood. He doesn't go to Adam with that. He takes it to his wife, who he catches alone. And he seems reasonable, and he says, look, you could be the first goddess, but you need a little bit of occultic knowledge to help you evolve into goddesshood. She's like, but God told us that if we eat it, we'll die. And then Satan comes right out and says, he's a liar, he's lying to you. He knows that if you eat of that occultic fruit, hidden is what the word occult means. Hidden knowledge is occult knowledge. It means the same thing. If you eat of the occulted tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will become the first goddess. God knows that, and he doesn't want competition. Now, does that sound like something you'd be interested in? And Eve is sitting there and he says, man, she looked at the tree and she saw it was, beautiful to the eye, good for food, and desirable to make one wise, which is where we get the phrase Wiccan, and we get the beginnings of witchcraft right here in the garden. She takes it and eats. But that's not all, Steve. What happens next?
Gives to her husband.
She gives it to her husband. Satan didn't give it to her husband. Satan didn't deceive Adam. He went to the woman. I'm so glad you came tonight because you're a perfect foil. Goodness forbid if I'm here with just, okay, use Ringo. Bad Ringo with a wig on. And no, we got Lucy here as our prototype of the epitome of the desirable woman. Beautiful, innocent, and pure. That's Lucy. But Eve even more so. But yet, she was naive, gullible, and believed the lie. And, oh, God's cheating me out of goddesshood. Yeah, well, it sounds good, so okay, sign me up. And then, as soon as she did it, the first thing she wanted was, hey, I want a partner in crime. I want my husband to join in this awesome trip to goddesshood. And so she goes to her husband, and I'm sure that when he saw her with the fruit, he was like, oh my God, what have you done? Oh, but honey, it's wonderful. You got to try it. Come on. And women, a lovely, beautiful woman can inspire a man to feats of greatness and get him to do things he might never do.
I haven't died yet.
Right. If you could say that, right? I don't think that, a talking llama could have come up to Adam and convinced him, no matter how well spoken he was, to try a bite of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But when he saw that his wife had already gone down a path from which there could be no return, I believe, and I've heard some others, Chuck Missler suggested the same thing, that he just made the choice that, well, if she's going to be separated from out of the garden because of this, I'm going with her. Because I love her, man. And I got two. He's cool. But
come on,
all right. When he made her, like Adam was like, now, yeah, right. Like remember, God created all the animals in the world, and He brought them to Adam.
Even the angels were turned out.
Right? I mean, he was like, have a zebra. Oh, that's nice. Oh, call him a doggy. Oh, look, a kitty cat. And so He named the animals. But then when God saw him playing with animals, he said, oh, it's not good for man to be alone. I will make him and help meet for him. That is to say, someone like him who can be an assistant or an aid to him, and he will have a companion. So he puts Adam to sleep and does surgery on him, pulls out his rib, and fashions that rib into, voila, a woman. And Adam, when he wakes up, he's like, hey now.
Nice work.
Yeah, I mean, you can read it right in Genesis chapter 2, where he's now we're talking. This is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone. I like the orangutans and the giraffes, but I like her more. And so Adam, because of his heart, was swayed into betraying God. Not because he was deceived, but because I believe he made the conscious decision to choose his wife over his God. If she's going to be separated from the garden and thrown out into the world, I'm going with her. I'm not letting her go by herself. And so he took the fruit and he ate it too. And when God came down, Eve, there's a piece of fruit missing from the tree. Who did he call when he came down to the garden? He called Adam. Adam, where are you? Now, remember who's doing the asking. It's God. He's not asking because he doesn't know the answer. He's asking, this is a teaching moment, right? This is, when like your parents, like when they have, because they already talked to the school principal or whatever it is you did, they already know. They already discussed the battle plan and what the punishment would be, but they'll ask you, what happened to school today, Steve? Like, what, do you not know? You just got, I heard you on the phone, I was listening in. You know what I did, you were talking to the principal. So they're going to let you explain it. What happened to school today? Okay, and so that's what God did. Adam, where are you? I was hiding because I was naked. Who told you that you were naked? Eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, whereof I told you not to, lest you surely die. Well, Adam says, right? He's like, the woman that you gave to me, okay? So technically, yeah. But, whose fault? So he's passing the buck a little bit, and then God looks at the woman, what is this that you have done? And then he goes on into the punishment phase. But the punishment for, the serpent one, he says, I'm going to raise up the seed of the woman. And that turns out that's going to be important. Because that relates to who?
Jesus Christ.
The Messiah. Born of a woman, but without a husband, without a man involved. And we're going to talk a little bit about the genetics behind what's happening in Revelation chapter 13 and 14, and why, no pun intended, human beings have chromosomes, right? We have 23 pair. And the chromosomes are what? What are the two types of chromosomes?
X and Y.
X and Y. And the man has which one? He's got an X and a Y. That's right. Here's our geneticist here. That's right, because you're a pre-med major anyway, right? Okay, so Lucy can do genetics for us. We got Ben, we got Harvard, Wharton School of Business mind, and Steve, our journalist, and Reno's psychology, I think, or something along those lines. But yes, the man has an X and a Y, and the woman has 2 X chromosomes. So it has been posited, and we'll look at that a little bit later, that when Adam ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he did something to corrupt a portion of the Y chromosome that ultimately resulted in physical death about 1,000 years later, or just under 1,000 years later. And that genetic defect is heritable, meaning it's passed on to his genetic descendants through sexuality. You have sex, you generate a new life form based upon your DNA combining with that of the woman, and mitochondrial DNA is passed on from the mom to the boy because men don't carry that, only from women, but the men pass on the information from the Y chromosome to the next child, if it's a boy, and that defect would be there, which is why for the Messiah to be born, it had to be of a woman with no DNA contribution of a man, so that the Messiah isn't born in original sin, a defective son of Adam. He is completely pure because the father that provides the Y chromosome DNA information for his physical body is none other than God the Father. And so that's a little bit of an aside. But I digress, as sometimes I do. So we find out that the 144,000 are introduced to us at the beginning of Revelation 7 as being these Jewish evangelists who replaced the church. And who else? There were 2 other guys that were helping out the 144.
The
Witnesses.
Yeah, witnesses.
2 witnesses. And those guys were, what ethnicity were those guys? Probably, right? I mean, because they, there's some people that think that they're either Moses or Elijah. Some people have suggested maybe Enoch, but But the idea, I mean, most of the votes usually go in the way of Moses and Elijah, who were two of the greatest Jewish prophets of all time. So you'd have the 144,000 Jewish evangelists and 2 Jewish prophets preaching the gospel to the whole world during the tribulation period. And during the time of their ministry, they are unstoppable, right? They can call down fire from heaven, and all the efforts of the Antichrist to get them fail until they complete their ministry. And then God in his infinite wisdom allows the wall of protection that he supernaturally raised up for them to do the job that the church gets the privilege of doing only for a few more days possibly, and that is preaching the gospel. And once they've completed their ministries, what happens to them?
Killed.
The 2 prophets are killed in the city of Jerusalem, and the 144,000, well, we find out later in the very same Revelation chapter 7 that they are now in heaven with the Lord. Because look at verse 13, it says, I like how Steve, how you put that, John gets caught up into heaven in Revelation chapter 4 in his own rapture, and he sees these people, 144,000 guys in white robes, and the person giving them the tour, the tour guide reaches up, John, who are these 144,000 dressed in robes? And John politically correct says, I'll know this. I'm not even hazarding a guess, because if I get it wrong, I look like a moron. And so, one of the elders, and the elders are what? The elders from out of, the elder that's talking to John is none other than one of the leaders of the church. The church has been raptured. This elder, there aren't elders amongst the angels in heaven. This elder that's talking with John is a member of the raptured church that has now become the bride of Christ. So John is now outside of the space-time continuum because he's gone from being on the island of Patmos in exile right here at around 96 AD. Boom, and he's been caught up to the Father's house, and so he's now outside of the space-time continuum. So it's no longer 96 AD for John when he's talking to the angel in Revelation chapter 7. It's no time. He's outside of time. Theory of relativity, Einstein, we'll get into theoretical physics tonight because we're going to be talking about genetics tonight. But we can do theoretical physics later. Get a lot in our Bible study. So anyway, so John is asked, in Revelation 7, by one of the elders of the church who has now been raptured, and they've gotten their rewards in the Bema seat, and so they're giving John the tour of heaven. And he says, verse 13, Revelation 7 says, then one of the elders answered, saying to me, who are these arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from? And John says, sir, thou knowest. And then he said to me, okay, I'll tell you. He said, these are they that come out of the great tribulation and washed the robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Now, if they came from out of the great tribulation, these 144,000 must have been, because it says, who are these guys in the white robes? They're the 144,000 that we saw a little bit earlier, and it says they came from out of the great tribulation. They didn't get to heaven from the great tribulation on the space shuttle. They got there after they were martyred, and we find out that the souls of those that die in the Lord immediately are transferred to heaven because of the verse in the Bible that says, absent from the body, present with the Lord, with no pit stop in purgatory. Because there is no purgatory. It's a Catholic myth. Okay, and then it goes on to say, these are the ones who come out of the great tribulation and washed the robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And it says, neither shall they hunger anymore, the sun shall not strike them anymore, for the Lamb that's in the midst of the throne, and the throne of God is in heaven, right? It says, he will shepherd them and lead them to living fountains of water, and God will wipe away all the tears of the eye. So the 144,000, we get sort of an advanced preview of what happens to them shortly after we get introduced to them. Now, a moment to talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses while we're on the 144,000. This little book here is called Revelation, Its Grand Climax at Hand, apostrophe. This I got from one of my Jehovah's Witness buddies when I was at the state attorney's office. think she kind of liked me, so she got me stuff from Brooklyn when she would go up there on her pilgrimage, because it was like, Brooklyn is their world headquarters, like going to Mecca if you're a Muslim. And they would buy stuff there, like, I got this from Brooklyn, the world headquarters of the Jehovah's Witnesses. So I asked her to get me the Book of Revelation study book, which tells them how to interpret the Book of Revelation. And it has all these wonderful artistic depictions of, like, Jesus, he's like this white Western European guy with like a beard and whatever, and all the Jewish prophets are like sort of white Western European guys, strangely enough. But, I mean, I guess, you're sort of shopping to your audience, but there's a certain section here where Revelation 14 is referenced. And let's see, this is actually one of the few spots that I've been able to find in writing where they actually come right out and say that they believe that Jesus is none other than the Archangel Michael. And they use Revelation 14 to say it. They say that the 144,000 are these special anointed class of Jehovah's Witnesses who are destined for heaven, whereas the great crowd from Revelation 14 that's referred to there, I saw this great multitude, those are the Jehovah's Witnesses on earth. The problem is the multitude's also in heaven, and the Jehovah's Witnesses believe that none of them will ever go to heaven. They're going to be on earth forever. But that Jesus, once he was crucified, turned into the Archangel Michael, exalted, sort of this gaseous, vaporous spirit being who never will return to earth. The physical Jesus is dead, forever dead. Charles Taze Russell, the founder of the Jehovah's Witnesses, tells us. And so Jesus goes off to heaven and becomes sort of this spirit God, like ghost-like figure, but he's really the Archangel Michael. And we have it right here in writing in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Revelation Grand Climax, book chapter 29, on page 199, it says, let's go ahead and read. And I saw, look, the Lamb standing upon Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father written in the foreheads. They direct quote from Revelation chapter 14, verse 1. We did that correctly. Just like
they added 2 words.
Oh, give it to us, Ben.
It's instead of saying having his Father's name, they say having his name and his Father's name.
Ah, good point. Which cuts to what theological sort of paradigm they're trying to promote.
Then that's going to allow you to say, well, his name could be Archangel Michael.
There you go. So it's speaking to the deity of Christ, right? They do that, a number of times. That's a good catch there, which you would expect from our Harvard trained.
And you know what? One reason I know that, if I could just throw this in,
you can.
My New Living Translation, which is my old study Bible, which I've now stopped using forever, because I read the New Age Bible versions, it had pointed out specifically that addition to the NIV and many other Bibles of those 2 words to that verse.
Are you serious?
I had circled it. So it means that in my New Living Translation Bible, they are giving also the additional N name, which then opens it not only to Archangel Michael, but allows you to open it up to whoever. Maybe there's someone else who you follow during the tribulation, and maybe it's his name.
Wow. So your labor in the Lord is not in vain, man, because now you can explain, having studied from the New Living Translation, which is really what? An Alexandrian perversion of the Textus Receptus, which is the original manuscript of the Bible. So now you are an expert in matters theological and grammatical regarding the Bible.
So it's not just the JWs. It is new Christians.
Wow.
The NIVers, the traditional churches, you name it.
Well, I'll give the Jehovah's Witnesses credit for at least giving us a generally accurate depiction of Revelation chapter 14, verse 1. Nothing about that would cause me a problem if I'm a brand new, non-saved person and I don't have anybody coming in to propagandize me. If I read that, Mount Zion and with him 144,000 having his name and the name of his Father written on the forehead, I wouldn't know enough to know that I'm being told that it could be something else. But the reason why the Jehovah's Witnesses organization is so dangerous is because they print up books like this. You can't just read your Bible and understand, because they say, Charles Taze Russell says, without our study helps, you'll go into darkness within 6 months if you just read, goodness forbid, the Bible alone. No, Charles Taze Russell says it'll take you no more than 6 months for you to go into complete darkness, studying only the Bible every day. So they add this editorial information to that verse. And the editorializing, which is done actually written in Brooklyn and printed in their printing press in Brooklyn, which, because I think they went into bankruptcy, they ended up having to sell. So now they're upstate New York, and the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society building, which is this world famous thing, is actually no longer even owned by them, because I guess they felt the financial crunch as well. But this is what their Jehovah's Witnesses editors add, and they tell you as a Jehovah's Witness, you must understand this verse to mean the following. It says, as we have seen, this is from page 199 of chapter 29 of the Revelation Grand Climax Jehovah's Witness Bible Prophecy Study. As we have seen, this Lamb is the same as the Michael who cleansed the heavens by casting out the devil and his demons. Now, is that a drop your jaw moment or what? It's stating unequivocally that this Lamb that we've seen with the 144,000 is none other than the Archangel Michael who cast the devil and his demons out of heaven. It says, he is the Michael whom Daniel describes as standing in behalf of the sons of God's people. That's, Michael from the book of Daniel. And it says, as he prepares to stand up to execute Jehovah's righteous judgments. And then they quote Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, Revelation chapter 12, verse 7 and 9. And then it says, since 1914, this self-sacrificing Lamb of God has been standing on Mount Zion as the Messianic King. And then it goes on to talk about, various things. It says, no, for Jesus, after his death and resurrection in 33 CE, they use the term common era, because they're not biblical Christians, and they refuse to use AD, which is the Anno Domini, meaning the year of our Lord. They are using the secularized way of referring to the post-birth of Christ era as the common era. And they're off by years, 32 actually. But they say, since his death and resurrection in 33 CE, he was installed as a foundation cornerstone on the heavenly Mount Zion and the city of God. Hence, the Mount Zion represents the exalted position of Jesus and his joint heirs. So it's making no bones about it. There's no way that I've misinterpreted what they're saying. They're saying that the Lamb, who's with the 144,000, is the same Archangel Michael from the book of Gabriel, and he is the same person that we refer to as Jesus. So, if you run into a new Jehovah's Witness, they may say, they never told me that Jesus is the Archangel Michael. I would never believe something like that. It's right here in their own book, right here, and then there's the page number, and for those of you looking, there you go. Go to the videotape. We got the videographic evidence in yellow, proof that the Jehovah's Witnesses teach that Jesus is none other than the Archangel Michael, the created being, and they use Revelation chapter 14, verse 1 to prove that. So, alright, so I've digressed, and so now we'll move on a little bit. But now, let's bounce ahead. Steve, run over to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 22 for us.
Okay, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 22.
Yep.
But ye are come unto Mount Zion, and unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels.
Okay, so Hebrews chapter 12, verse 22 tells us, just like Ben had pointed out earlier, that there is a Mount Zion in heaven, in a heavenly city called Jerusalem. So there's a Jerusalem in heaven, there's a Jerusalem on earth. There's a temple in the Jerusalem in heaven, there was a temple in the city of Jerusalem on earth. And so there's a Mount Zion in the heavenly Jerusalem, there's also a Mount Zion on earth. So the Mount Zion that is being referenced in Revelation 14:1 with 144,000 is the Mount Zion in heaven, and the 144,000 got there after they completed their ministry, they were martyred. They were killed. They loved not their lives unto death, it says in Revelation 7. That's the dead giveaway. If they didn't love their lives unto death, right? Revelation chapter 7, verse 13 through 17 gives us that these are they that come out of the great tribulation, and they washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And so we find out later that these guys were martyred. They didn't love their lives so much that they refused to stand up for Christ. And because they stood up for Christ, they lost their lives. And they are now in what Hebrews chapter 12 relates is the heavenly Jerusalem. So Lucy, flip over to Galatians chapter 4 for us. We're going to bounce around in the Bible a lot tonight.
Sorry.
It's okay, she's using her technologically advanced way to use and study the Bible. So Galatians chapter 4.
Okay.
Read for us verses 24 through 26. You got a King James there? Or?
Yeah, I have King James.
Oh, nice. I like the King James. It's accurate.
I just
Stick
wish
with those things.
Oh,
Yeah, 24, 5, and 6.
I have no idea how this thing works.
Okay, so we're going to
Does
have
anybody have a book? Maybe I can read it.
Steve, since,
Oh,
yeah,
perfect.
okay.
There we go.
Did you flip to it already, Steve?
It's already
Good man. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
That's Galatians, right?
Yeah, it's right there.
So 4,
24, 25.
24 and 20. Okay. For his Hagar is a Mount Sinai and
Start again, and I'm going to stick with the let's pronounce
24,
it's the
25,
word of
26.
God, man. So give it to us, but give it to us clearly.
Perfect. 24,
Enunciate.
25, 26.
24, 5, and 6.
Okay, perfect. Which things are an allegory, for these are the two commonest, the one from the mount, Sinai, which gendereth to bondage, which is Hagar. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai, in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem, which now is and is in bondage with their children. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all.
Okay, so we find out there is a heavenly Mount Zion in the heavenly Jerusalem. There's a Jerusalem on earth, and we find out there's also a Jerusalem in heaven, except the Jerusalem above is free, right? And the one here on earth is in bondage. It has been for a number of centuries now. And so now we're going to sort of segue over. Pop over to Revelation chapter 21 for us, Ben, and read verses 1 through 4. We're going to bounce almost to the very end of Revelation because that gives us a little bit of insight as to what we're talking about here in Revelation 14. 21 verses 1 through 4. And then Steve, it'll take you no time to get in. Daniel 7 will be up for you.
And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven, saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God.
Okay, so we find out that there is a new Jerusalem, a heavenly Jerusalem that has a tabernacle, a temple. The tabernacle just means dwelling place. And it has it in the city of Jerusalem. That's the heavenly Jerusalem that we had just sort of read about. Lucy told us about in Galatians chapter 4. And so now, Steve, if you would, and we'll finish up. All that was just verse 1. What a book, this Bible, man. It's got layers upon layers of awesomeness. Daniel chapter 7, verses 23 through 25.
Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of his kingdoms are 10 kings that shall arise. And another shall arise after them, he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and he shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until the times, and the dividing of the time.
Okay, so what we find out there in that verse is that the Antichrist is going to wear out the saints of the Most High. And he's going to be given a time to do this, to kill these tribulation saints for how long?
Times, and dividing of the time.
And we find out that that is what? That's analogous to what time frame do we have here? That our 70 weeks of Daniel time chart, and the 70 weeks of Daniel, or 70th week of Daniel, is divided out into how many parts?
2.
And the 2 parts are how long in terms of months?
42.
Days.
1260.
Years.
3 days.
So there we have it, right in Daniel. He's saying the Antichrist during the second half of the tribulation period is going to be able to kill at will the tribulation saints. And that's what happens to the 144,000. That's what happens to the 2 prophets. They're able to preach during the first half of the tribulation and their ministry is strong. But during the second half of the tribulation, as time begins to run short, God allows Satan to come to full power through the Antichrist that's now resurrected from the dead, and he kills off the 144,000 witnesses.
So that's by the time we get to midpoint there, the gospel's pretty well done being preached at that point.
Not so fast, my friend. It's pretty well done being preached by men.
By men.
Aha! But yet there is a catch. Because all the men preaching the gospel are dead.
Yeah.
Right? So, don't talk to me about prosperity gospel, Benny Hinn, TBN. This is not the depiction that I read in the Bible about what it means to be a follower of Christ. I mean, right? Martyrdom, and since we're on the topic, and I would submit to you, this verse proves that during the second half of the tribulation, basically everybody that's a believer on earth is killed. Now, do we see that type of thing happening? We see it now. We know we're in the last days. Right here in the good old U.S. of A., supposedly a Christian country, what happened this time last week, last Thursday? It turns out there was a shooting, right? There was a shooting in a community college. And, it reminded me, I was looking at an article on the net, and I was like, they were talking about this gun control stuff, that these shootings, not false flag in that they didn't happen, but some people suggest that these are pre-programmed MK Ultra mind control people that are going in and killing people to promote a gun control agenda. And it reminded me that a few months ago, in South Carolina maybe, or North Carolina, a white guy went into a church and killed everybody. And they were like 9 or so black victims who were shot by some white guy in the church. And shot by a white guy in a Bible study on the East Coast a few months back. Now, last Thursday, on the opposite coast, on the West Coast,
Black guy.
There's a guy who isn't white, goes into a school, and he kills 9 people, and they're all white. So you got all black victims on the East Coast with a white shooter, and then you got all white victims on the West Coast with a non-white shooter. But the common denominator, because you got different colored victims on each coast, you got whites on the West Coast, blacks on the East Coast, you got a white guy doing the killing on the East Coast, and a non-white guy doing the killing on the West Coast. But what's the common denominator in both of those shootings of everybody that died?
Christians.
Everybody that died was a Christian. In the church, you could say, well, yeah, it was a church, so everybody that died. In the school, it was a little more complicated for the Manchurian candidate to find his victims. Because, right? He had to go one by one. What's your religious affiliation? Zoroastrian. Okay, bang, I'll shoot you in the leg, get out of here. Oh, what's your Hindu? Okay, bang, I'll shoot you. I'm an atheist. Okay, the guys that were Buddhists, atheists, agnostics, Zoroastrians, Wiccans, they got a flesh wound to the leg and lived to tell about it. But everybody that raised their hand and said they were a Christian, he informed them, well, that's great, because I'm going to send you to see your God in 1 second. And then he shot him in the head and shot him dead. And we know that because one of the girls that didn't get shot, but whose friend's head exploded on her, and she fell to the ground, pretended that she was dead, and she heard this entire thing. And she told CNN, and CNN tried to cover the whole thing up and just said, oh, it was just a mass shooting. But no, it wasn't just a mass shooting. It was a targeted assassination of Christians. Twice in the last 5 months, there have been targeted assassinations of Christians. White Christians, black Christians. East Coast, West Coast. White shooter, black shooter. We've had the common denominator being the killing of Christians not in Central Africa or Western Africa or some Islamic fundamentalist state, but right here in the good old US of A, the killing fields for the Christian church. Don't talk to me about the prosperity gospel. It's just not true. We see that the hallmark of being a true follower of Christ is laying down your life, loving not your life even unto death. And that may be the great reward, by the way, that they've obtained. That may be for those of us that are faithful. That's the reward God gives us, to allow us to be martyred for our faith. Because those individuals have just earned a prize that even John, who wrote the book of Revelation and the Gospel of John, not to mention 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, the book, he wrote all that stuff. But he will never get the reward that those 9 folks got last Thursday when they were killed in Oregon, was it? And the guys in South Carolina got a few months ago. And that is the martyr's crown. The martyr's crown is a specific crown only given to those who laid down their physical lives during their earthly ministries. They ended their earthly ministries with a bang. Well, no pun intended, but yeah, literally with a bang in many cases. But it is a great honor, and we see it happen. So martyrdom, yes, absolutely. The 144,000 are in heaven because they've been killed, and they can no longer preach the gospel. Now, let's flip over to Ben. I think were we up to you next?
No, back
to Lucy.
Yeah, it's fine.
Lucy, give us Revelation chapter 14, verses 2 and 3.
2 and 3, okay. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers, harping with their harps. And they sung as it were a new song before the throne, and before the 4 beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song, but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth.
Wow. Now what in the world are they talking about? I heard in heaven singing, and the people singing it were before the throne. So they're in heaven, and before the 4 beasts and elders, and these are the heavenly beasts that are like these strange creatures that are in heaven praising God. The cherubim and the seraphim are singing with the church. And there's a group of people that are up there. The church is there. But there's a new song being sung that even the folks that are in the church can't sing. And only the 144,000 can learn it. And that song is the Redeemed Martyr song. I don't know what the words are or what the melody or harmony will sound like, but it's going to be a beautiful song. And the church is going to sit there and serenade it like, oh man, look at, wow, the 144,000 that just came out of the tribulation after laying down their lives and loving not their lives unto death. They're singing this new praise song to Jesus that even though we got killed, you redeemed us by your blood and whatever, however the lyrics are, only the 144,000 could learn it. Why? Because they were the ones that laid down their lives. It's a special honor, man. It's not something to be, oh my God, we don't get killed, and oh my goodness, Lucy, you're in school, and goodness forbid. I think about you, when I thought about this, I was thinking about you, like, you're an openly, outwardly, obviously Christian girl. Like, goodness forbid, the next nut job goes into the school, the next Manchurian candidate asking for Christians. I know what you're going to say when he asks you, are you a Christian or not? That's going to be, Lucy won't be at the Bible study anymore because she'll be in heaven with the church, or with the elders and, waiting for us to come up in the rapture. And that's sad and tragic commentary on the state of affairs, not only in our country but in the world, but particularly in our country since it's supposed to be such a Christian place. And so people that are really believers need to decide, are they really saved? Examine yourself whether you really be in the faith. Because there was a debate, posed by one of the people on Facebook, Jackie Allen, like, if you're a Christian, should you say that you're a Christian and maybe get killed, or should you lie and live to see another day? And I was like, how would you even ask a question like that? Did you even ask a question like that? It causes me to question whether you really did come out of the Catholic Church when you came out, allegedly, many years. Because there is no question.
Yeah.
Of course you say who you are. You wouldn't want, in a school setting, where, you've been sharing your faith with the same 6 knuckleheads for all semester, and they're like, yeah, we know CERN's is the keg party, you're going to be in the back, you're going to be drunk, and you're like, nah, I wasn't at the first keg party, and you're establishing credibility with them. But when the rubber meets the road, and Mr. Gundry comes in, like, are you a Christian? No, not me, man. I don't even know that guy. Just like Peter did. Yeah, right? No. You betray the Lord, and you just destroy the faith of everyone you ever shared the gospel with on campus.
I mean, I'm on campus. I'm with a youth group, and I share with them. They're called the Waves, and now they don't want us to pray out in public.
What?
Which is crazy.
What?
Wait.
And this is on campus?
This is in Miami-Dade College right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've been attending them. It's been like over 2 years now that I've been with these people. It's like separate from my church and from this. And now they're like actually like getting down on it. Like, we don't want this here, but they're saying it like in a nice diplomatic way.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Are we hearing
this?
this?
They gave us a room. They gave us a room.
Security
So
guard.
now you have to go to this room to be able to pray and like
nice
practice
and
what you-
quiet.
Yeah, because it's getting to the point where they're like trying to like kind of end that
I
little
don't think they
group
understand.
there.
So where were you guys doing it at?
Before, we would be out in the open. It would be perfectly fine.
Downtown campus?
Yeah, no. This is in the North Campus.
On the North Campus?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we'd be there perfectly fine. We'd pray, a nice little circle there. Wasn't even that many students, so it wasn't something like you're causing such a big impact, you know what I'm saying? But then out of nowhere, we have our leader telling us, hey, yeah, we're gonna have to start moving into this room.
I'm staggered.
We're gonna have to start going into the room because he's trying to say it in a nice way, but I totally understood what he's trying to say. Hey, the school's pretty much telling us if we don't do this, it's gonna be this or nothing.
We're gonna pull away all of your
exactly.
funding.
So right now we're actually located in a room now. And if we do it, it has to be very discreet, and like you can't have like you see how we have like you have the postcards back there. We used to have the same thing. Like we can't even have that. They're becoming very strict with Christians now, due to the fact that now the whole homosexual thing. Like they don't want us to be out there like talking bad about them because they feel like you're contradicting what's happening with the United States and like the law.
Man.
The law. So yeah, it's getting very strict, and it's very.
And I've done things on the North.
Discrimination.
It is discrimination, but it's not discrimination. Like it's discrimination towards us. But then, if we do, exactly. If we were to say something against, any other thing that's not for our religion, they look at us like we're the crazy ones. Like
I've done things and attended.
There's no freedom. I don't believe it. No.
I've done things on campus at the North Campus and different political rallies I've gone to for the state attorney, and it was the most open. I mean, we had what's the group that Let's Get It Started? What's the name of that? Will I Am. They were on campus one day at some and so they were allowing anything and everything. It was the wildest day on campus, ever, and to see that Christians. As homosexuality is being brought out of the closet, Christians are being driven into the closet. It's clearly unconstitutional, but you're being told you have to be in a room.
In a nice way, they're pretty much saying you have to be in a room. And we used to have like this event where you can, like each year, they have like the Christians go and perform and do all these things, like spoken poetry, singing. That's canceled.
Are you serious?
It's crazy. Yeah.
Did your leader ever tell you what their justification at Miami-Dade College?
That's one.
By the way, anybody thinking of enrolling, think twice.
I spoke to him personally. He told me it was like, there's a lot of conflicts right now with the way other people view us, and then it's like we didn't understand. Like he didn't understand. He's like, okay, so I don't get it. Like, what are you trying to say? He's like, well, there's a lot of more groups out here, and a lot more religious groups out here too. There's not just a Christian group there. There's like various like other religious groups out there.
Of course, but
but they don't do it outside like we do. So they're kind of saying, if they don't do it, why do you guys have to do it? Can we all just be in a room, kind of thing?
Yeah, but we're evangelists, and that's part of our faith.
Yeah. Exactly. But what can you do about it? It's either this or no.
Or
so it's kind of like we have to like suck it up and just.
Wow, Lucy, I'm shocked.
So,
I'm shocked to hear that.
Yeah, it's sad, but we just have to pray for it.
When did that happen?
It's already been a year since the fall semester starting. Since then.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I don't know. Hopefully, it'll change a bit. I mean, my youth leader.
Do you really think it's gonna?
He
gonna
tries.
get worse.
He tries to like pray outside, but I feel like even he has a bit of fear, just for the fact that he doesn't want to like have the students not be in like
on campus at all.
On campus, exactly, on a Christian group like what we've started. That they've started for years already.
Well, Luce, I'm glad you came, because that adds quite a great
deal
of.
When I heard about the shooting, that's how I knew the whole that they were like categorizing. The guy had categorized Christians. We were even talking about it. We were like, "That's crazy." Imagine they come into our school, and then we're open. I'm very open about my.
You sure are.
I mean, on Facebook.
My goodness,
I'm like,
you are straightforward, and in a nice way.
If I have to from the Bible, and if I have to tell people I'm a Christian, I'm not afraid to say it. But lately, it's like they want to put this fear into us, and it's just so terrible. Like, what are we supposed to do at this point? And especially for young people, it's very tough.
Yeah,
like for us, it's very tough because you get like excluded from everything. Like as you can see, even in school, which is sad.
That's right, because Christians are haters.
Yeah,
So,
we're supposedly we're the haters. I think they hate on us more.
Well, we're the ones getting shot. And nobody seems to be too up and on.
The funny thing is, all we do is show love, and that's what.
Wow,
That's
well,
what
Luce, that is a tremendous testimony to see that you're being persecuted for your faith here in Miami. You're not going to exchange student program in Saudi Arabia. This is where it's illegal to do that. I mean, you get killed or go to jail for that in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and I think it's just going to get worse as time passes. Like, I feel like it gets worse as time passes.
So Miami-Dade
we have to pray for Lucy.
Yeah.
We'll certainly do that. So Miami-Dade College is persecuting Christians. Forbid anybody out in the internet land thinking about sending your kids there. Don't. So anyway, that's very insightful, man. That's insightful. So, so clearly verses 2 and 3, the Christians there are the 144,000. They're singing the martyr song because they've just been killed. So let's have you read verses 4 and 5, which gives a little more background about these 144,000 that were on the earth, preached the gospel, got killed by the Antichrist, and got invited up to the throne in heaven. What else does Revelation 14 tell us about these 144,000?
These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb.
Oh, interesting. Now, there's. Go ahead and read verse 5.
And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God.
There's a feast of first fruits. In the Old Testament, you would bring certain grain offerings and fruit offerings and like that. It's interesting because it would seem to suggest that the harvesting of the 144,000 from the earth is almost, in God's eyes, it's like it's the offering of first fruits, where you bring the best and the first of the fruits, not the leftovers.
Right.
But during this tribulation period of the redeemed, it's like the 144,000 potentially or possibly. I think that the interpretation of this verse is it has become sort of a first fruits sacrifice unto God. A blood sacrifice isn't necessary to get salvation, but they offered up willingly the most valuable thing that they possessed, which was what? Their physical lives. And they were offered to the Lord as sort of a first fruits offering to the Lord. And it says, these were redeemed from the earth, meaning they were taken out of the earth. Not redeemed at the earth or in earth, but they were redeemed from the earth. You redeem it, you turn in, you're like, hey, I'm going to redeem these coupons. Here, give me that. And they're taken out of the wickedness of the earth. Sexuality is running rampant at this point. Every type of imaginable perversion is going on. We see it already beginning to happen when you compare how sexualized our society is today as compared to, say, 1950, as compared to 1970, as compared even to 1980. It's just more and more progressive. And so we see that these guys are not defiled with women. Not that the Lord is saying He hates women and because of Eve they're all. It just says they're virgins. They're in this tribulation period. They're the only guys in town that aren't having sex with everybody. And you'll be having sex with women, children, men, animals, aliens, extraterrestrials. It'll be mega sexuality. But the only guys not participating in it are these standalone guys, the 144,000. Who are those freaking guys? They don't go to the Friday night get to know your neighbor social sex parties. Which in college, you have those type of men. Lucy, you're in college. We've all been to college. And we kind of know that you had these socialization rituals where you go to the fries, get as drunk as possible, and people sometimes wind up having sex with complete strangers in the upstairs bathroom or something like that. But it's going to be like an out-of-control frat party all over the world during the tribulation period. And even during the Great Tribulation period, you would think that people are falling to the knees.
You'd have something else to do besides that.
Right? Wouldn't you be worried about something else? The demonic Nephilim monster might come through the window and sting me with the stinger.
Yeah.
But now I got to get my swerve on, man, because, I'm branching out. And Steve, if you would, read for us Revelation chapter 9, verses 20, 21, and 22, and give us some sense, because Revelation 9 is the chapter where the transgenic demon monsters came out of the abyss and had the king Apollo over them and are attacking the world. And while all this is going on, what's the world doing? Same old, same old.
So it's Revelation 9, chapter
20
9.
through 22.
And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils, and idols of gold, and silver, and brass, and stone, and of wood, which neither can see, nor hear, nor walk. Neither repented they of their murders, nor their sorceries, nor their fornication, nor their thefts.
So, in the New King James, sexual immorality is used there for fornication, sex outside of marriage. So, people are still getting their sex swerve on with a little witchcraft thrown in. Like, I gotta do my Wiccan ceremony, I gotta do my Ouija board, love, sex, orgy thing, to worship the god of sexuality. Even while all heck is breaking loose around them, people are obsessed because, in Romans, Paul wrote, he says, the sin that you secretly serve, that one which you serve, you are its slave. So eventually these people are enslaved by their sexual liberty. And the sexual debauchery of this time frame causes the 144,000 to be separated out and to be distinct and different. So that's why they stand out so easily, and that's why they're so easily targeted by the Antichrist and eventually killed. So, let's see. Who was up next? Steve. Read for us verses 6 and 7.
And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountain of waters.
Okay, so now wait a minute. Now there's an angel flying in the midst of heaven, having what? The everlasting gospel to preach. Why is an angel now flying through heaven preaching the everlasting gospel?
God's merciful to the bitter end.
Well, more to the point, because there isn't anybody else left to preach. They're all dead. The 144,000 have been killed. The 2 prophets get killed. And now, as Steve says, because God is merciful to the very end, he still is concerned about the Revelation chapter 9 guys that are having the sex party orgy. He still wants them to have one last chance, because hell, the lake of fire, was created for whom?
The devil and his angels.
The devil and his angels. It was never the intention, and that's why John Calvin and Calvinism and Presbyterianism is a farce and isn't biblical Christianity and is not the gospel. Because we know from that verse that God never predestined any son of Adam to spend eternity in the lake of fire. That place was created for Satan and his angels. No son of man was ever predestined or created for the specific purpose of being a charcoal briquette in the lake of fire, which is exactly what John Calvin taught and what Calvinism to this day teaches, though they disguise it by calling it reformational theology. I'm a Reformation theologian. I'm a Reformed theologian. I'm a Reformed Christian.
Which is that verse that says that the lake of fire was made for
Jimmy Christmas.
That's a good one to have.
5 or so.
It is. That's a key verse.
Yeah.
Steve, man, you are my Bible answer, man. If you get that, you get the gold star and the game ball for tonight. See if you can find that while Steve's looking for that.
Thank you.
I would just say that, yeah, it's clear here that the angel flying through the heavens is now preaching the everlasting gospel because God is merciful, because he doesn't want anybody to go to hell. Nobody's predestined to hell. If people were predestined to hell, he wouldn't even bother with the angels. So what we see laid out, and Reno will be seeing, we see different dispensations of God's grace. And we look at our time chart here that gives us the fall in the Garden of Eden. And from the time of the fall, we find out that the gospel is preached. Genesis chapter 3, verses 15, 16, 17, proto-evangelion, the first gospel was preached in Revelation chapter 3, promising that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the seed of the serpent, meaning the virgin-born God-man would crush the biogenetic descendant of Satan, who was the Antichrist. That was promised right in the Garden of Eden, even before they got kicked out. We already had the gospel being preached. By whom? By God himself. He gives the first gospel. And from that point onward, we go into the next dispensation, which is the dispensation of the law and the prophets. And then God starts giving us a preview of the gospel in the form of the message of the prophets. God is going to bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. The day of the Lord is going to come and destroy evil, and God will bring peace on earth, and the wisdom of God will cover the earth as waters cover the sea. And so we find out during the dispensation of the Old Testament prophets, the pre-gospel, the good news in the form of the prophets is presented by sons of Adam. But then the church era comes when Jesus comes to earth. And now the Old Testament Jewish prophets are replaced by the Jewish disciples of Jesus who found or promulgate what Jesus refers to as his church, which originally started out as being almost predominantly Jewish, right? And it spread to the whole world. But then the church's ministry ended when an event called what occurs? What is the event?
Rapture.
The rapture, of course, right? The rapture ends the church's ministry to preach the gospel on earth. Now we can no longer do it, right? Because we're not on earth. Now the role falls back to Israel again. Now Israel replaces the church as the primary evangelist on the earth. The 144,000. 12,000 Jewish virgins, each one from one of the 12 tribes, to make up 144,000 super evangelists, and 2 prophets, both of whom are probably Jewish as well, are preaching the gospel despite the Antichrist's attempts to kill them during the first half of the tribulation, right up till the second half of the tribulation, when they are martyred for their faith. And it's even at that point, now we're at the very tail end of the 70th week of Daniel. At the very tail end. You don't have anybody left to preach the gospel anymore. The prophets are gone and dead. The church has gone to heaven in the rapture. The 144,000 witnesses to Jesus are dead. They've been martyred. The 2 witnesses that were raised up, they've been killed. And then they're resurrected 3.5 days later when God says, come up here. And they get raptured up into heaven on national TV. International TV, by the way. And so even at that point, God doesn't give up on the sons of Adam because he wants no son of Adam in hell. So he sends an angel to preach the gospel to the guys having the sex orgy party while they're worshiping the devil, because they are still biogenetically human beings, because they haven't taken the mark of the beast yet, which we're going to get to in a second. And we know that because there's a verse that Steve has found for us in the book of Matthew, which means he is our most valuable player for the day. The game ball is being handed in the spirit to Steve. Give us that verse, Steve.
Matthew 25, verse 41. Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels.
It doesn't say for the devil and his angels and for the non-elect.
No.
There's nothing in there about the non-elect.
Not at all. It says everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels.
All right, so Lucius, so that you know why I'm so up in arms, there is a doctrine being promoted in the church called Calvinism. I don't know how familiar you are with Calvinism, and I don't know how well familiar you are with this guy named John Calvin, who was a former Catholic priest, who, along with Martin Luther, rebelled against the Catholic Church. And back in the 1600s, they started the Protestant Reformation, or late 1500s, started the Protestant Reformation, and they became like kind of really the Protestant popes, And John Calvin wrote a commentary to the Bible that was added to a translation in the English of the Bible. It's called the Geneva Bible, and his notes and comments put a slant on. That's why I say on study Bibles, you got to be careful who's writing the study commentary, because you're going to get a slant. And so Calvin puts a slant on his translation of the Geneva Bible, that predestination, that God selected a very few people. It's exactly the same thing that Jehovah's Witnesses teach, with the 144,000 being the only ones that are predestined to go to heaven, and they know who they are because God has handpicked them. But everybody else is destined to not go to heaven. That's what Calvinism teaches, and that's what John Calvin has slipped into the Geneva Bible, which is why they decided that in the late 1500s they needed a new Bible to replace the Geneva Bible without a Calvinist slant to it. And that's why the King James Bible became the new Bible. There was the Geneva Bible that got replaced by the Bishop's Bible, but the Bishop's Bible was in the churches, and the Geneva Bible were in people's houses. And so they decided, we need an English language Bible that gets rid of John Calvin's predestination slant, but it's just as clear and accurate, because it's not a bad translation from Greek to English in terms of the accuracy. It's just the predestination Calvinistic slant that's hidden in the Geneva Bible that makes it problematic. And
in the notes, because
go ahead.
The King James then was specifically made without notes at first.
Oh.
And so that was getting rid of Calvinistic notes.
Wow, good point. Because Ben, for a couple of years now, I think, has had a Geneva Bible. And when he first started going to Brazil to teach the Bible to some of his students, because he writes part of the year in South America, in Brazil, he would use the Geneva Bible. And he and I had a discussion right here in the Bible study. He's like, why is the Geneva Bible not the best? And why do you like the King James and not the Geneva? And there it is, and that's why. And so now he has ordered two new. He's got one King James Study Bible for prophecy and dispensational issues, and he's got one specifically tailored to creation, science versus evolution, which is an area he's kind of specializing, developing a specialty in. And so, John Calvin promoted the doctrine and created a new gospel that says only the elect, a select few sons of Adam, have been handpicked from before time to go to heaven, regardless of how they lived their lives. How they ended up being forced by irresistible grace to get saved. Even if they didn't want to get saved, they had to.
Yeah.
And everybody else, even if they wanted to get saved, no matter how badly, they couldn't.
So what's the point?
It's wickedness. It is satanic subterfuge. It is the Jehovah's Witnesses disguised as Protestant Christianity. And that's why I'm such a pain in the butt about Calvinism. And gosh, we've gotten so much meat here. Wow, we've covered some stuff, man.
Nice segue.
Son of a gun, man. I don't know where all that came from, but it came. So anyway, Steve, thank you, man. You are an invaluable asset to the group. And so, now we're back around to you, Lucy. Read verse 8 for us.
And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication.
Wow, okay, so we have another angel. We have, this other angel comes along and says, fell is Babylon the Great. I mean, basically pronouncing the end of the Babylonian system. Which, Steve, what is this Mystery Babylon thing all about?
Roman Catholic Church.
I'd say it's the Roman Catholic Church. It's a false form of Christianity. But it isn't just the Roman Catholic Church. It's the Roman Catholic Church now, but it dates all the way back to what, Steve?
Boy, what? 300 BC, 325 BC?
Maybe even, and you could.
Oh, I'm sorry. After, yeah.
It would certainly be longer than that. I would say that the reason why it's referred to as Mystery Babylon is because it dates all the way back, not to the Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel in Daniel chapter 7, 8, and 9, but it dates all the way back to the Babylon of Genesis chapter 10, where Nimrod, the first one world government, world ruler, built the Tower of Babel as a stargate way to interact with the fallen angels, and learned how, through sexual rituals that were occultic in nature, to defile, the Bible says, halal, which means to defile, his DNA. And it says through a ritualized occultic ceremony, he was able to defile his genetics and turn himself into a Gibborim, which is synonymous with the other Hebrew term, Nephilim, which means the fallen ones. He turned himself into sort of a God-man, a half, a descendant of Satan. He was able to do that through genetic tampering. Verse 8 tells us, gives us sort of a preview of coming events, that Babylon, the mystery Babylon, perverted system that started in ancient Babylon by Nimrod, who became the first God-man and created this religion along with his wife Semiramis after he was killed. Then the whole mythos started of him going up into the sun and becoming the sun god, and then with a ray of sunlight impregnating his wife Semiramis so that she was a virgin who gives birth to the reincarnated Nimrod, who is also known as Baal, and the son is Tammuz, but Tammuz is the son of the sun god, and it's really a foreshadowing of the coming of the Antichrist, born of a virgin woman who was the wife of the sun god, so she was the sun goddess, and she attached to herself what title that continues on to this very day?
Queen of Heaven.
The Queen of Heaven is the wife of Nimrod, and this Queen of Heaven became so predominant back in ancient Babylonian times that the Semitic nations that came from out of there began worshiping her as their god, the Queen of Heaven. And even in ancient Israel was the perversion so prominent that the prophets wrote a number of passages, Jeremiah, like, oh, you bake cakes to the Queen of Heaven, how dare you? And look at what's going on in the Temple of Solomon. They are turning with their backs to the Holy of Holies, facing the sun, so they can worship towards the east, facing the sun, like, oh, we worship you, Baal / Nimrod, and your wife, the Queen of Heaven, while God is in the Holy of Holies, getting their back, which is a disrespectful act. So we see that, the second angel comes along and pronounces that this wicked Babylonian system of sun goddess worship is going to come to an end. And even though now it's disguised as a form of Christianity in the form of the Catholic Church, it is going to come to an end. We find that. The second angel announces that. And so now, Ben, go ahead.
Don't forget that Queen of Heaven these days is Mary, according to
in the Catholic Church. The Queen of Heaven is Mary, right? Mm-hmm. To this day, that title is used, but instead of it being applied to Nimrod's wife Semiramis, who was part of the Babylonian sun goddess system, it is now applied to the sun goddess or the fertility goddess, the virgin-born queen of heaven, that's known as, in Catholicism, what would you guys call it? You guys were never Catholic, were you? Well, in Catholicism...
We're very young. I've never learned.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. That's something that it's good. The Queen of Heaven is Mary, the Virgin Mary of Catholicism. And it continues on, as Ben said, to this very day. And so God is going to come and do away with that very shortly. So, now we get to, Lucy, the third angel. Read for us verses 9, 10, and 11, and tell us what the third angel says.
And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever. and they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name.
Wow, so we get a mouthful there. So this is what we started talking about last week before you were here. It says the third angel followed him because there's no more evangelists that are humans to preach the gospel. So another angel comes along, and he says in a loud voice so that everybody can hear, if any man worship the beast and his image, which is maybe a genetic clone of the Antichrist, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And they shall be what?
Tormented.
With what?
Fire and brimstone.
So wait, they're not going to be tormented with regrets about bad decisions?
No.
They're not going to be tormented by, geez, I could have maximized my value and I didn't. So that's not the torment that they're talking about here. They're saying that the torment will be with fire and brimstone, Lucy. Not regrets, not bad decisions. Like, I shouldn't have married that guy. If I had married Kevin instead, I would have had a much happier life. I regret it. I just regret. That's not the regret they're talking about. They're talking about fire and brimstone. And it says that they are going to be tormented by the fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the Lamb is none other than whom?
Jesus Christ.
So he's not the dusty-footed, humble Galilean carpenter anymore. He's not the little baby suckling at Mary's nipple, which is how he was depicted when the Pope was speaking at the Catholic University of America, right down the street from where I went to law school when I was living in D.C. They had this gigantic painting of Jesus being depicted as some fat, cherubic little Western European baby suckling on the bloated breasts of some fertility guys.
Right?
Tammuz. It was Tammuz suckling on Semiramis' breast. It was blasphemous and outrageous. And I was upset about it. And so, we find out that this angel is yet again warning. If God predestined these people for hell, what would be the point of warning them? If they had no ability, because they didn't have the willpower to repent, why would you waste time preaching the gospel? All the people that preach the gospel to these losers who were predestined to hell anyway, all of the people that took the time and effort to do it got killed doing it. You think that God would allow them to lay down their lives for a task that is a fool's errand? There's no chance that anybody could ever get saved? No, that's not biblical. It doesn't make sense. The only reason the Gospels continue to be preached is because people couldn't still respond to it. So John Calvin is wrong. So now, what is this mark of the beast thing that they talk about? If you take the mark of the beast, you're going to burn in hell and you're going to burn there forever. Wow. The mark of the beast must be, man, more than a tattoo of 666. And Ben kind of touched upon what my theory has been, but let's videotape back to the beginning, Steve.
All right.
Why don't you roll over to Genesis chapter 3 for me? We already talked about it a little bit when we were sticking it to the women for seducing Adam into taking a bite. In fact, I like that, man. Let's just read that, man. Let's read verses 1, Genesis 3, verses 1 through 6. We're throwing that in, and no additional charge. We're going to throw in verses 1 through, let's throw in 7. 1 through 7. Throw 7 in extra, no added cost.
Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, if God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons.
Gosh, man, and I threw that in for you guys, man, because that's foundational, Lucy. That's foundational to everything that you read in the Bible about Jesus and the cross and the Antichrist and the mark of the all is foundational to that very moment right there, Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. That's how the fall occurred, and that's why Adam chose to place his obedience and his love and his desire for his wife above obedience to his God, and the entire human race fell as a result of that, because something, I would submit, happened to the Y chromosome in Adam when he ate of that occultic fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that causes him to be the bearer of the death gene that is inherited by the human race, men and women, if there's a man involved in the sexual reproduction process. So let's go ahead and sort of flip over, Steve, if you would. Man, you might as well go ahead and say, let's go to verse 8 and just go ahead and run that right down through, give me verse 8 through 12.
Okay. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden. And the Lord God called unto Adam and said unto him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, Who told thee that thou was naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat? And the man said, The woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat.
Wow. And then let's go ahead and follow up, Steve. 13, read 13 for us.
And the Lord God said unto the woman, What is this that thou hast done? The woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat.
So verse 14.
And the Lord God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life.
15.
And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel.
Now that's a key point there.
That's the one.
There is the seed of the woman that's going to be matched against the seed of the serpent. The serpent is going to have seed. Now, the Hebrew word there is zera, which is sort of the Hebrew way of saying spermatozoa, sperm. Women don't have zera or spermatozoa. That is the Holy Spirit's way of alerting you to the fact that this woman is going to give birth to a child without the addition of Adam's seed, which would provide or pass on to him the heritable genetic defect for death. So a virgin-born God-man will be the Messiah that will come to save the human race and destroy the seed of the serpent. So if the seed makes reference to an actual biological descendant of the woman, and we know that in the form of Jesus, he was actually a real man, not just a spirit, then if the serpent in the same sentence is said to have seed also, that can't be a metaphor or some type of turn of a phrase to sort of paint a metaphorical picture. It must mean a literal biogenetic offspring, just like the Messiah was a real, live, biogenetic, walking, talking person. The seed of the serpent is also going to be that. And that, my friend, is the first reference in Scripture to the Antichrist, right there. And the promise is that Jesus is going to destroy the Antichrist in a face-to-face confrontation. Now, we won't get to that until we get to Revelation chapter 19 and 20. And these guys don't know anything about even there being a Bible in existence. They don't know this is being recorded for future posterity and use. They're just hearing the words, and God is promising the rise of a Messiah.
A quick question, Europe. So you're saying that the Antichrist is a biogenetic offspring of Satan after Satan indwells him? Because
Not necessarily. No, I'm saying that that there's this whole hybrid race of non-Adamic humanoids that have been on the earth since Genesis chapter 6, and we're going to get to that in a moment. And I believe that the Antichrist is one of them. So he's already a biological descendant of the Antichrist before Satan goes in and uses his body as an avatar. But he's already, because it says the Antichrist was from the very beginning damned to destruction. That's where you get some predestination going. It says that this man, the son of perdition, was from of old was condemned and damned from beginning. And when I read that, even as a kid in elementary school, I remember reading, but wait, that's not fair. It says, I was like confused, like my theology, I've been reading the gospel, and the gospel says anybody can repent and be saved. This seems to be saying that the Antichrist was already condemned from before he even did anything in Revelation. Because I was taught that the Antichrist is a man who makes a decision to follow after Satan and become the president of the world, and in exchange, he worships Satan, and then he becomes the Antichrist. But that's not what Scripture is teaching. Scripture is teaching the Antichrist isn't even a real man. He is a hybrid. He is, for lack of a better term, a Nephilim. He has human DNA, but he also has the fallen angel DNA, only in this case, directly from Satan in some way, so that he is the direct offspring of Satan. Satan has a genetic offspring. The other fallen angels could sire children by having sexual intercourse with women. Satan certainly could do the same thing. Why would he be limited and not be able to do something his lower level angels have been doing since the flood of Noah? And we're going to talk about that. But let's finish up chapter 3 of Genesis, Steve, by going on, and let's see what the punishment for Adam was. We'll skip over the woman stuff for today, but let's go ahead and read verses 17 through, 17 through 8 through 19. 17, 18, and 19.
Okay. And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake, and in sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it was thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return.
So the punishment of the woman was she's going to have pain in childbirth, and she's going to try to rule over her husband, but God's going to let the husband rule over her. That's her punishment, but that's relatively minor in comparison to Adam's punishment. Adam's punishment was, because of you, the whole universe is now subject to the curse, which particle physicists and theoretical physicists refer to as cosmic entropy, which we know ultimately means that everything in the universe is going to wind down and die. You like a clock that's powered by a spring. Tick, 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 tick. And then we experience heat death, and when there's no more heat in the universe, everything dies as a result of Adam. And it says, and you are going to die. You're going to die because of what you did. And everybody that lives on earth after you is going to die too because of what you did. Terrible, man. He's like, you're responsible for everybody's death. And so, the shock and horror of what Adam had done is now becoming apparent. He was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I've destroyed the entire universe. But God says, cursed is the ground for your sake. He's not just saying it as punishment, but what he's saying is, if I don't curse the land and cause everything to die, you will have to pay back the debt you owe for what you did, which will result in you spending eternity in the lake of fire. So even now, immediately after the fall, God is already revealing to Adam, but don't worry, because I know the future and the past, because I'm outside of time, and I saw you mess up before I created you. But yet I created you anyway. Now you tell me how Calvinist predestination can fit into that. God saw Adam fall before he created him, and yet he still made a way for him to be saved. And he's explaining it to him now. I'm going to curse the entire universe because, without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. And so the first thing he did was what? He grabbed a couple of innocent little animals and killed them because they were covered with figs, plants. He's like, no, plant. Yeah, the grain offering, the fruit is fine, but that's not good enough. I need a blood sacrifice, not because he's some wicked monster like, Baal or Moloch, but because the price of sin requires blood for blood. And so he killed an innocent animal so that he wouldn't have to kill Adam and Eve. And he allowed them to live on, and he said, don't worry, I'm going to send an atoning sacrifice, a living lamb who's going to be a man and God. And that person we find out is none other than Jesus, right? He becomes the Passover blood sacrifice. We don't have time to get into that because we're going over time. But let's just, now that we're in Genesis, Steve, let's keep you in Genesis. We found out that Satan's going to have a biogenetic descendant. Now, if you would, give us, so Lucy can understand where I'm coming from with some of this crazy stuff, Genesis chapter 6, verse 4.
There were giants in the earth in those days.
And the Hebrew word there for giants in the King James is Nephilim, which means the fallen ones. There were the fallen ones in the earth in those days, also known as giants, who happened to be giant.
And also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown.
So clearly Genesis 6 and 4 is teaching that, despite what your little footnote Bible study note commentary says, it clearly says that the sons of God, the B'nai Ha-Elohim is the Hebrew phrase used there, always makes reference to angels. The B'nai Ha-Elohim, the angels, saw women that they were beautiful, and they came down to earth to marry them and have sex with them and have families. Why? Because there were no women up in heaven to do it with. That's why Jesus said, in heaven, the angels do not marry. And so some theologians said, well, because Jesus said angels can't get married. No, he didn't say that. He said in heaven they don't get married because there aren't any women to get married to. A woman is a brand new, never before seen creation, which was created from the brand new, never before creation known as man. And God took a piece of his rib and fashioned it into the woman. And so they're like, what the freak is that? I've never seen either one of those things. But that one, that one's really good looking. So, it was like, Cadillac next to a Lamborghini. They're both attractive, but the Lamborghini was really like out. And so they were gravitating towards it. And so some of them left their first estate, it says in Jude and in Peter, and came down to the earth and took on human bodies so that they could pick the prettiest girls in class. And they picked all the most beautiful girls in town, and they married them and impregnated them, which caused God to lose his mind. Like that is the bridge too far. It's one thing that you rebel, but you are impregnating my innocent creation and creating your own race of people. So he took those angels and immediately put them in a prison called Tartarus. And in Greek mythology, there's a lot of stories about Tartarus being the place where the Titans who rebelled in heaven were locked up under the earth. God locked up those fallen angels in Tartarus for impregnating the women prior to the flood. But it says they were Nephilim or giants in the earth in those days, and
also after that.
After the flood, which is what God used to kill off the Nephilim DNA, the gene line of the hybrids were killed off by the flood. But Genesis 6 and 4 said they'd come back again. Mm-hmm. And Jesus warned in Matthew chapter 24, in the days of the coming of the Son of Man, it would be just like in the days of Noah. How was it in the days of Noah? Well, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. So Jesus is saying, when I come back at the rapture, when I come back at the second coming, the Nephilim will have already come back to earth. And so we find the Antichrist is actually one of them, who is disguising himself as this incredibly charismatic world leader, and he's worshipped as a god.
Because he's a mighty man. He's a mighty man.
Mighty man, because he is in fact a mighty man, a god-like man, even though he's not God in the sense of God. So, Steve, Genesis 6, chapter, verse 9.
These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God.
Stop right there. Now, the word generations, it's a word that means it's the equivalent of what? It's the equivalent of what we would call DNA. But there was no word called DNA then. And it says he was perfect in his generation. The Hebrew word there is tamayim, and tamayim means unblemished, uncontaminated, undefiled. So we find out that his generations or his DNA was uncontaminated with what? With intersexual relations with fallen angels. So his mom wasn't, married to a Nephilim. So putting him in the ark preserves not only all the animals from being killed so that they can be in the new world and breed and reproduce, but the human Adamic DNA line, which we are all descendants of, that ran directly from Adam to Noah, because Adam and Noah were alive actually for a couple of years at the same time, because Adam lived so long and Noah lived a long time as well. So virtually everybody knew each other at the family reunions. So God preserves Adam's DNA by preserving Noah through the flood, so that when the flood is over, he and his wife, they've already got kids, they can repopulate the earth, which is exactly what happened. So the word perfect, tamayim, means unblemished or uncontaminated. Now, we'll wrap up shortly, and Ben's going to do a dramatic reading for us very shortly, though he doesn't know the material yet. But because he's a writer, and he went to Harvard, he should be able to do this extemporaneously without a lot of stress or aggravation. Okay, so Steve, let me keep you in, since we're in Genesis, let me get you in Genesis, and then Lucy, you can go to 1 Corinthians for me. So Genesis chapter 10, verse 8, Steve.
And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth.
Okay, so Cush is the father of this one world emperor called Nimrod. And Nimrod, it says, began to become a mighty one. And the Hebrew word is Gibborim, which is the same word that's used to translate the phrase Nephilim. And the Hebrew phrase in that sentence is halal. Through ritual, sexual, or genetic defilement, Nimrod began to become, meaning he transitioned over time, into a Nephilim. From being an Adamic man, he, through a occultic sex ritual, was able to change his DNA to make him into a Nephilim god-man. And that's why the whole world worshipped him as a god. And he became famous worldwide as Baal, the god of the sky, and why his wife became the queen of heaven. And so from that point, when men worshipped Nimrod, because he was this powerful leader, but towards the end of his life, he became more than just a man. He became a god-man, and he became worshipped. And that's where the whole Mystery Babylon sun god worship, sun goddess worship system originated from Genesis chapter 10. Nimrod changing himself through some sexual occultic ritual into a Nephilim Superman. And for the people who saw 300, the movie, there's a scene in there, in the second one, where Artaxerxes goes into this pool in some sacred mountain, and he's able to do something to himself. Goodness forbid they didn't show it on camera, but he did something, and he comes out, and he's a god man. And so I don't know if you remember that scene, but it's a very telling scene, and that's exactly what the Bible says Nimrod did to himself. He changed himself from an Adamic man into a Nephilim Superman, which means since Jesus became what? To die for the sins of...
man.
To die for the sins of men. He didn't become a Nephilim. He didn't become a fallen angel in human flesh. So he can't die for the sins of the fallen angels. So they can't be forgiven. The Nephilim, it says, can't be forgiven. The Rephaim, which is another name for the Nephilim, they don't have a savior. So when they manifest in human flesh, after their physical bodies die, then they have to eventually go to the lake of fire. And that's why demons are so pressed, because they had physical bodies before the flood, and then God killed their bodies with the flood of Noah, and their disembodied spirits became the demons of the New Testament that Jesus would cast out, and they would, no, please, let me go into the pig. I don't want to be like, I don't want to go back to the abyss. I'll hang out in the pig. That'll be fine. And Jesus allowed them, and so on and so forth. So, okay, so, Lucy, if you would, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Read 20 and 21 for me. Thank you for that. You did your Alexander Scorby work for today. I promise we're almost over. Just so much stuff there. It's just so much important to talk about. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
But now Christ is risen from the dead and has become the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since by man came death, by man also came the resurrection of the dead.
Oh, now wait a minute. So he's saying, since by man came death. What man might he be talking about?
Sounds like Adam.
Adam. And so, by a man, then redemption and salvation has to also. Which man would that be?
Oh, Christ. Of course.
There you go. Christ is the one who stands in place of Adam. Since everybody on earth died that's the son of Adam, because of Adam, now we need another Adam, but one who isn't broken. So, if you would continue on in the same chapter, read verses 45 through 49.
And so it is written, the first man Adam became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. However, the spiritual is not first, but the natural, and afterward the spiritual. The first man was of the earth, made of the dust. The second man is the Lord from heaven. As was the man of dust, so also are those who are made of dust. And as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are heavenly. And as we have borne the image of the man of dust, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly man.
There you have it. So, the Bible says that who is the second man?
Jesus.
Correct.
As compared to the first man. Who is the first man?
Adam.
So the second man isn't Adam's first son.
Right.
The second man, symbolically speaking, spiritually speaking, is none other than Jesus Christ. The first Adam, became a living creature and sinned and died. So now we needed what? Corinthians tells us, the last Adam becomes a life-giving spirit. So the second man and the last Adam is none other than whom? Right. So the idea we need to see is in Genesis 3, the fall of Adam caused the fall of the entire human race. So God becomes a man, not a Nephilim, to die for the sins of man so that all of the human race can now be saved through the second man as compared to the fallen first man, or through the last Adam as compared to the fallen first Adam. And so there we have it. We have that. So now I'm gonna read to you a little excerpt from the book called Corrupting the Image. Doug Hamp was a born-again Christian who also has some background in genetics. He gave a nice little summary of what he believes the Antichrist will be able to use. Satan is able to use technology when this book was written, it was 4 or 5 years ago, and the technology was already available for 10 years prior to the book being written. So by now, the technology that I'm about to read to you is, far more advanced. And so I'm starting at page 243, and it says, the genetics of deception. He writes, the technology known as recombinant DNA is, in fact, now makes possible for a grown man or woman to be altered at the genetic level. If a non-human gene were introduced into the human genome, then the person would no longer be fully human, but would by definition, not religious definition, but by secular scientific definition, he would become a hybrid. The ancient name for a creature that is composed of different kinds is known as a chimera. And that's from Greek mythology. It was this monster that was part goat and part lion and had wings and could fly. And so scientists have used that same ancient mythological creature, the chimera, and use it to refer to an organism that is composed of more than one gene line. They call them transgenics or chimeras. And chimera is the mythological creature name. Transgenic is the scientific name because it's taking genes from more than one organism and transferring them together to make yet a third organism, a hybrid. And he says, and that is also the name given to hybrid creatures by scientists today. Not religious leaders, but scientists today. We consider some strange creatures in the previous chapters, such as the spider goat. There's a spider goat, because they've taken the genes of the spider and put it in a goat, so they can make lots and lots of spider web silk, which is really useful in making bulletproof vests and things of that nature for military purposes. And for creating green glowing pigs, to name a few. So they've got glow-in-the-dark pigs who have the genes from the stingray or the eel that in the water can produce light, and they stick that in the pig, and the pig can grow. And the way they do that is through a scientific procedure involving what's called recombinant DNA. So I'm going to read a little bit about that, just so that we can see that the Bible is supernaturally written. Because John in 96 AD could know nothing about genetics or DNA or recombinant DNA, which is a brand new thing. Recombinant DNA is hybrid DNA that has been created from more than one source. It doesn't occur naturally in nature. It was created by scientists in a laboratory. In fact, the geneticists from Stanford University in California and the University of California at San Francisco, how UC Berkeley, which is a very impressive genetics lab and school, got left out of the equation. I don't know, but Stanford, UC, San Francisco had a couple of scientists who found out, hey, you can do this interesting thing with human DNA, and you can combine two different strands of human DNA to create a third strand that combines information from both. Well, let's call it rDNA, or recombinant, meaning recombined DNA. And so it goes on to say, the basic procedure is where a DNA strand is opened up and then a gene from another organism is inserted, making a new strand of DNA. Then the RNA, which is a mechanism that's located in each one of the cells, stands for ribonucleic acid as opposed to DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. The RNA, the job of the RNA is to make more DNA. RNA is, Steve's DNA needs more of it to grow like some new skin. Okay, we're going to make more of okay, what's the pattern? And got nucleotide base pairs, and letters A, T, C, and G, which are different nucleotides that are comprised in each one of our cells. And they are letters that spell out words, that spell out paragraphs, that make us each uniquely human, but different from one another, like a snowflake. And so what you do is you open up the strand of DNA, and the RNA replicates the new strand, and it is passed into the entire system. When recombinant DNA is then further altered or changed to host additional strands of DNA, the molecule formed is referred to as a chimeric DNA molecule, with a reference to the mythological chimera that consisted of a composite of several different animals. By means of recombinant DNA, Satan may be able to convince humanity to insert demonic genes perceived as desirable into the human genome. If you could have superpowers. That's what Heroes is about. The new show is on tonight right now. That's what the Avengers spinoff called Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. All season, they're talking about humans that can become meta-humans. The Flash, which is another popular sci-fi show on television. Every one of those shows talks about, hey, human, guess what? What if you could be like the video game characters that you play for hours and hours a day? Well, guess what? That's available to you, because we can do a little bit of tweaking to the genes in your DNA. We can make you Wonder Woman, Superman, and things of that nature. And we find out that you can actually do that in science. It says, the genetic composition of the person, therefore, will result in that person becoming a chimera. Now, this is what secular scientists are saying. Using recombinant DNA, a fully mature man could inject himself with the selected gene or genes of another species. The process, which is really just a matter of copying and pasting, is explained by this Japanese scientist, and he goes on to say, therefore, we can see how a man with access to technology and to Satan's seed, and the Bible says Satan will have seed, could then merely inject it into his DNA, then once inserted into his own DNA, the RNA inside the DNA would copy the new strands with the foreign gene, and it would spread in time throughout his entire system. This is genetic science we're talking about, not science fiction and not theology. If you put the gene in there, and the Bible says Satan will have DNA, will have genes, if you put it in contact with your split open DNA, your RNA will look at it and say, oh, oh, I'm supposed to make copies, and it'll take the nucleotides A, T, C, and G, adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guarine, and combine it together in whichever way the gene that's added tells it to, and it'll make replications until it finally takes over your body, so your entire body will have the new hybrid gene. And it says once the process of replication is complete, the man would no longer be a mere human. He would in essence be a chimera, a hybrid. He would be a beast. And that is coming from science. And then he goes on and adds, he says, approximately 3.5 years after coming to power, the beast will, and he's now talking about the biblical Antichrist, will require everyone to take his mark, the number of his name, and to worship his image. Exactly how that will be realized is impossible to know with certainty, but we can suggest, however, that the image, and we were talking about that a little earlier, the image that the false prophet gives breath to could be some transhuman or transgenic creature, or some form of synthetic biology. And I've been doing a lot of reading on synthetic biology and synthetic DNA. That stuff is happening now.
Yes.
Right now. And Lucy, who's a pre-med major, she knows all this stuff.
They're like the box babies. I don't know.
Oh my gosh! And I've
it's
heard
like the name for it. It's like they're called box babies because it's literally the woman gives her egg, guy gives his sperm, but now you can alter everything. So your kids can come out with like blue eyes. They can be tall. You can actually make your baby. Yeah, a lot of celebrities are doing it. Very wealthy people tend to do it.
What is that? So, remember, like at Christmas time, you can go to the mall and you can make your own bear, and you go like, I want this.
Exactly, just like that. So now they're doing these things. So now you see these children who are beautiful. You know, you're seeing like celebrity kids who come out pretty much perfect. You know.
So they're doing it.
So they're doing it already as it is. Yeah. Like I even have a friend whose parents did it, and they had twins. They had the kids exactly the way they wanted to make it look. Like everything, and then they delivered. That's why they're called box babies, because they delivered the egg back to you, and then you go to the doctor. They put it in you, so you're able to like have the kid go
designer baby in a box.
It's pretty much what you're
So
they're called box babies.
So you add a different gene to it, a gene of a non-human. You make a super
crazy. No, it's crazy. It's unnatural. I feel like it's very unnatural.
Well, listen to what he goes on to say. The important thing to note is that it will truly have breath. This image of the beast he's now talking about, it will truly have breath, and it will not simply be a clever trick like a hologram. Mm-hmm. He says the technology already exists, and Lucy is telling us about it right now, already exists to make some version of the image. This image is what will then cause all to take the mark. And then he quotes Revelation 13, which we've already read, and he concludes by saying, transhumanist and end times researcher, and he mentions the guy's name. He mentions Horn, Tom Horn. And he says, they've suggested that recombinant DNA may be the means by which the mark of the beast is introduced onto an unsuspecting world through the rewriting of one's DNA so that the person is no longer fully human, but is part beast or part Antichrist. And he says, presumably, some point after the rapture, humanity, and this is great because he's like you, he's a biologist and a biochemist, but he's also a born-again Christian who believes in the rapture. And he's combining his scientific knowledge with his biblical knowledge, and this just makes for fascinating reading. It says, presumably, at some point after the rapture, humanity, in an effort to not be removed from the planet, like those taken in the rapture, because that's what the government will say, they got taken, and to be able to evolve like the beast, the Antichrist, the supposed leader of the aliens. He says that there's going to be an alien suggestion when the rapture occurs. The government will say, well, no, the planet Venusia took them because they were evil people, and you've got to take this mark and change your DNA, or the beam me up Scotty tractor beam will snatch you. And it says, in order to evolve like the beast, this mark will allow their DNA to be rewritten, thus altering their image. That image that was in God's image, though fallen, will therefore become genetically like the beast, and of course, like Satan and his fallen angels. The mark then would simply be the proof, or perhaps the means by which one has undergone the genetic transformation. This action of taking the mark will condemn them to hell forever. And then we studied that a little bit earlier. Because they will no longer be in the image of God. Not because God is resentful and mean, you got a tattoo, I hate you, I'm going to send you to hell forever. No, it has nothing to do with that. God will no longer be able to save you because you are no longer qualified for salvation by the only Savior that there is, which is Jesus Christ, the second man, not the second Nephilim, the last Adam, not the last seed of Satan. And it goes on to say, they'll be condemned to hell forever because they are no longer in the image of God. He says, how sad is it to realize that what man will trade his soul for, God was willing to give him for free. Man wants to augment himself with greater powers and to go on living forever, but without God. God, however, has already made a way for man to have these powers and eternal life if he will simply humble himself and ask. And that, I couldn't believe that I was reading that in, written by a person who is a geneticist and a molecular biologist. And he wrote basically a small dramatic sort of recitation of what he believes will happen. And I'll defer to Ben at this point to read just a couple of pages of what he says in his own eyes, the way he sees this whole thing playing out. So we're going to bring Ben forward, who will be his first time on screen, though he's been with us in heart, and just give us start with the green, and then for red, just like in a stoplight.
Okay.
That's where you stop. And I get to sit and hear you put your dramatic
show.
Take over, Ben. Give it to us, buddy.
All right.
We're not here.
From the epilogue, restoring the image through Adam's eyes. For Adam, the resurrection was indeed sweet, oh so sweet. Though after he died, he went to a place in the grave where he was comforted, he and those with him, who had anticipated the seed of the woman, were not in the delightful presence of their Father, the Blessed One who created them. They remained there for 4,000 earth years until suddenly one day the seed of the woman, the Redeemer, stood there before him. How beautiful he was to behold, and Adam's heart raced with joy at that moment. After the Redeemer rebuked those spirits who were disobedient in the days of Noah, he then led all those who had been captive in that place up to the Creator's abode in heaven. There they remained for another 2,000 earth years, which seemed like mere days, in that exalted place in the Creator's presence. Yet still, he and all the others who had been rescued were mere spirits, souls, if you will, without bodies. Though being there was blissful, sometimes something still felt like it was missing without the body he had been created in. Then after those 2,000 years, Adam finally heard the blast of the anticipated last trump, and those who were asleep bodily were raised, at last. After 6,000 years, his glorious body, with its covering of light, was restored to him. Oh, the joy to have his glory light-emitting body. He felt whole again, like the day when he was created, yet now it was even far greater than that day. Now he understood the depth of the love that his Creator had for him, that he would send his only begotten Son to die on that despicable cross, so that he, Adam, the very one who brought sin into the world, and because of sin, death, could be restored to the uncorrupted and pure image of the one who made him. The seed of the woman, the great King and Creator, mounted up on his white horse, and all those in heaven did likewise, and then they rode toward the earth. They entered into the earth's dimension just over Egypt in a great cloud of glory. Then they proceeded north towards Teman, and then to Bozrah, where the great king treaded the nations in his anger, so much that he even splattered his garments with their blood. Over there, there he was, the wicked one. Adam remembered so vividly the words spoken there in the garden, I will cause enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He will strike your head, and you will strike his heel." So this was the prophesied seed of the serpent, the beast who had gathered together the kings of the earth and their armies, and was leading them to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. So this was the finality of that prophecy. Adam remembered how some 2,000 years ago the serpent struck the heel of the seed of the woman, Messiah Jesus, and now the serpent and his seed would be struck in the head. Adam noticed the horror on the face of the beast as he saw the great king coming toward him with what appeared to be a sword coming from his mouth. The beast tried to flee, but was captured, and with him the false prophet, who in his presence had done the signs by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. They were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur, never to be seen again. With the wicked one, the seed of the serpent vanquished, Jesus directed his horse to the Mount of Olives, and there his feet touched down, and all those with him. There, for the first time in 6,000 years, Adam returned to the world where he was created. However, the world he was returning to was utterly destroyed and would never rise again. Jesus, his King and Redeemer, said that in 75 days he would establish the new age upon the earth. For Adam, the journey was just beginning.
Wow. Ben, thank you. That was well done, man. Great. I mean, and it was well written. I mean, this guy in just 2 pages really summarized.
Spot on with doctrine too.
His doctrine, I was shocked. Like his doctrine was ice cold, on point with the rapture, and in 2 pages he summarized the creation and the fall, all of the Gospels in the entire book of Revelation, including the second coming and what's coming, and even the 75 days that he threw in.
Yeah.
If you look in Daniel, you'll see that after Jesus comes back, there's like this interregnum period, so that there's a 13,000 or 1,335 days where he actually is enthroned. After the 1,260 days, there's another 30 days to clean up the temple, which gives you the 1,290 in the book of Daniel, because you're like, well, it's supposed to be 1,260. But what's the 1,290? And then it says, blessed are those who come to the 1,335 days. And you're like, okay, I'm really confused. It's an additional 75 days after the second coming, when he actually gets inaugurated as the king of Israel and the ruler of the world, man. So he's got his doctrine down.
Is it the horizontal rapture also, when there's a transporting of
Yeah, and horizontal meaning from the United States to Israel, as opposed to from heaven to earth, or from earth to heaven. So yeah, the as Ben says, the horizontal rapture will be for whichever tribulation saints have not yet been killed in the FEMA camps, because they were next in line, and Jesus comes back and interrupts the execution. They're going to be gathered together from the FEMA camps in the Walmarts here in the United States, or wherever else they're in the Everglades hiding out, or they're in Mount Petra across the Jordan. Jesus is going to supernaturally teleport them directly to the Mount of Olives, and then he'll be on earth with them, and then he'll capture the Antichrist and crush him. And it says he'll stomp on him, and the blood will go up to the horse bridles. And he's making reference to a portion of Scripture we're about to get to, and we're going to definitely finish up this evening. So, Ben, you just read, so who are we at again? Are we at you, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, Steve, why don't you give us 12 and 13 of Revelation 14 as we wrap it up?
Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Write, blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them.
What on earth is he talking about? I remember reading that in elementary school and being so inspired. Like, I don't know what this means. Boy, it sounds profound and moving. Blessed are they, the dead that die in the Lord from now on. It's like, how are we blessed to be dead? I don't understand. What does that mean? What do you guys think?
Seems like, that once you become born again, the works that you do, preaching the gospel, follow you to heaven, and you were rewarded for it.
Well, and to the point, he says, here's the patient of the saints. here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. He's talking specifically about the Great Tribulation period, the second half of Daniel's 70th week. He's saying now, it's going to be so horrific on the planet Earth. If, as Steve said, you're born again, you'd be better off dead than going through the last of this 42-month period where heck on earth is breaking loose. And Satan and his monstrosity are allowed to kill willy-nilly. Antichrist is at his full satanic power. Jesus is saying, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord. In other words, if you're born again, if you die in the Lord, your spirit is immediately transported into heaven, where you're going to get the white robe and stand with the 144,000, and then somebody's going to walk, okay, and what size hat do you wear? Okay, as they fit you for your martyr's crown, you're going to be better off going there and getting the martyr's crown and dying a glorious death for Jesus, like Paul and like Peter, than sticking through to the final days. It incrementally gets more horrific as we get closer to the end of the 1260-day period, or the 42-month period. Each day is increasingly more horrific than the next. And it's at this point, in verse 13 of Revelation 14, he says, blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from now on. From this point forward, it's so bad on earth, dude, you'd be better off dead. Unless you're not saved. And then it's worse only because you wind up where? The lake of fire forever. So it's not blessed if you don't die in the Lord. So if you're not in the Lord, you better stay alive until you accept Christ as your Savior, and then you can get yourself killed and escape from the nightmare world. Okay, so Lucy, read for us verse 14.
And I looked, and behold a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle.
Okay, now this phrase, son